evening, everybody, and happy Halloween. My name is Deja, and I am the National Vice President for the Melanator Minds Network. Thank y'all for joining me on this week's Thursday Night Live podcast. So, tonight, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of jump into it. If this is your first time joining us, we do these podcasts every Thursday, and we kind of talk about pretty much a myriad of things, whether it is spiritual, mental, or physical health. We talk about financial literacy. I'm getting ready to talk about voting. We talked about thriving as an author. We talked about yoga. We talked about pretty much anything you could think of. But, being as it's, you know, election season and we are literally days away from what could be a life changing election, I think that it's kind of important to talk a little bit about the history of voting and kind of remind everybody, especially African Americans and people of color, why it's so important to vote. you know because a lot of people I'm finding are not really understanding why it's so necessary, and we kind of like forget where we came from, like with not being able to vote at all and like being granted all these rights, and like how easily they could be snatched away, just as easily as Roe v. Wade was snatched away. Like we could literally see these things gone like that. And so I'm gonna spend some time kind of talking about the history of voting, some of the rights that were granted through some of the amendments and stuff like that. Talk about um the electoral college, and then hopefully by the end y'all will learn something. So voting has a really, really long history here, and it started back in 1789, where the states were given the power to regulate voting rights. And of course, they tended to regulate it to white male landowners. That changed in 1856, where they got rid of the requirement for them to be landowners. Then in 1868, the 14th Amendment was passed, and that extended citizenship to all people that were born or naturalized in the United States. And so that kind of made it a little bit more difficult for them to determine who to grant the right to vote to, right? So they were like, okay, well, we got rid of the requirement for them to be landowners, but now what, right? So they became a little bit more strict, and then they was like, okay, so then it had to be you had to be a naturalized citizen, right? Then they started restricting certain types of groups, like they restricted Japanese people, they restricted Native Americans, they started restricting certain groups from being able to vote because they deemed them unnaturalized citizens. So then in 1870, the 15th Amendment gave Black men the right to vote. And that was all, well and good. However, it was also stated that the states were prohibited from discriminating against anyone from voting based on the color of their skin. So by doing that, they gave them the right to vote, and they tried to make it reasonably fair for them. But seeing as how the states were left in charge of the regulations, then we have things called the grandfather clause. So these were legal ways of restricting voting rights. They had to pass literacy tests, they had to pay taxes, they had to show identification. Most of the time, African Americans couldn't do any of these things. So these were very legal ways of restricting us from voting. Mind you, they weren't discriminating, right? They weren't saying, oh, you can't vote because you're black. But they were saying, well, you can't pass a literacy test. Why can't you pass a literacy test? Because I'm maybe one generation out from being a freed slave. Maybe because I don't have the opportunity to go to school. Women did not receive the right to vote until 1920 with the 19th Amendment. I think that is, it's not funny, but that's saying something with like the state of our country. How we were the last, like how as women, we are the least protected group, and we were the last to receive voting rights, and our rights are the first to be repealed, or ours are like the first to be restricted. Again, these are all reasons why it is vital to vote. If you don't vote, then you lose your voice. You lose your voice. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed. And then in 1971, the 26th Amendment lowered the minimum voting age from 21 to 18. Now, we also have to take into consideration people who serve in like the armed forces, and because of course they're oftentimes like they're overseas during election season, and they also have a voice. So then in 1986, their uniformed and overseas absentee voting act was passed, and that allows them the opportunity to vote via absentee ballot, which I think is absolutely awesome. I love the fact that they can still have a voice, and I think that honestly, like I think that that's such a great thing that they considered how being overseas would affect them and affect like the country as a whole, because they do come home when their tours are done, and then like they do leave the service, and they still have to live here when all is said and done. So I think that that's something to consider also, like how that affects them and what they're subjected to as well. And then in 2002, the Help America Vote Act was passed. Um, yeah, I'm gonna just leave that alone. I'm gonna just leave that alone. The Help America Vote Act, that really just yeah, I'm gonna just leave that alone. I'm gonna just move on to talking about the electoral college. I noticed that a lot of people still kind of confused about electoral college, and sometimes I get a little bit confused myself. It is kind of easy to misunderstand because you be like, how can you lose a popular vote but then still win the election, or you know? So basically, there are 48 states all have as many congressmen in the electoral college as they do in the electoral college. And then Maine and Nebraska, they divide their votes proportionally. So let's say, for example, if uh, I'll use them as an example. Let's say, for example, if Harris won 51% of Maine, she would get 51% of however many electoral college votes they had in that state. Now, the goal for them during the presidential election for the electoral college is to get to 270. If they do not get to 270, it has to go to a vote. Now, I think like this is actually written, like the electoral college is written in the constitution, so it would have to be changed in the constitution if the process for that throughout the election is going to change. But I think that it might actually be a good way to keep the elections honest, because a candidate could win the popular vote for the election, but the electoral college goes to vote in mid December, and they don't necessarily have to give the votes for their state to the winner of their state. Typically they do, but they don't have to give the winner of that state those votes. But like I said, only Maine and Nebraska assign their electoral college votes proportionally. Each of the other 48 states and DC give all of their votes to whoever won that state. So once you, like, if you have to get to 270 votes, that's over half of the 536 electoral college. So like I think that it might actually be a good way to keep it honest, because the electoral college people are actually voted on. Like they actually get voted for. And like I said, they actually can choose and they get the vote and decide if they're going to just give the votes to whoever won in their state, or if they're going to decide, let's pick another candidate. And so, anyways, like I think that my overarching theme for tonight is just really just understanding like the importance of voting. Like if you don't know how to register, like each state has their own policies and procedures regarding how to register. Some states don't allow first time voters to register online. You might have to actually go to the Secretary of State, or maybe the clerk's office and register, or you might have to mail it in. Otherwise, you might be able to do it online. And then, like, after that, oftentimes they'll like ask you when you renew your IDs. Sometimes they'll, even when you do voting during like the other smaller elections, they'll ask you, um, if you want to do like absentee ballots during the other elections. So they give you other ways that you can actually cast your vote. So they try to make it, as seamless as possible. Early voting, they start broadcasting that heavy now. I know, like my stickers say, I voted early. It's my first time doing that. I did that this year. They do, and most time I think most of them are like libraries. Oftentimes, all you gotta do is have an ID. But I would definitely, like, regardless of who you support, it doesn't matter if you are Republican, Democrat. It doesn't it doesn't matter. I'm not here to tell you what to think, why, trying to persuade you one way or the other. The only thing I'm here to persuade you to do is to use your voice. That's the most important thing. That's the most important thing that any of us can do at any given point in time, is use your voice, right? If you don't use your voice, you will definitely lose it. And especially as women, as you can see, we have come way, way too far to lose it. Like, we only just got it in 1920, right? Like, it's only been right, but in all seriousness though, I really do hope that if you haven't already voted, go early vote, go to the library, you know, we got the absentee ballot, make sure, like I said, I mentioned before, the ballot boxes, if you don't feel safe, you can go drop it off at the designated ballot location. Like, but please, in all seriousness, like, vote. Vote. Vote like your life depends on it because it does. It does. It does. Well, I definitely hope that you guys learned something tonight about the all of like the process of how all of the laws regarding voting rights came to be and understanding the electoral college a little bit better. And I definitely hope that y'all will vote. And again, happy Halloween. See you later.